Notion recently announced one of their biggest updates ever with Notion Agents. They call it the most advanced AI agent for knowledge work, and it even marks the chapter of Notion 3.0. But, as with all AI, getting started with it can be tricky. Where does it actually create value, and where is it mostly a distraction? So in this video, I want to share with you my 7 favorite use cases for Notion Agent that are more than just, can you please add this to my to-do list? These are real-life examples from our consulting work. The last one is my absolute favorite, and it's going to save one of our clients thousands of hours of work over the next few months. Plus, I also have a little bonus trick inside on how to get the agent to work with large amounts of data without pausing every 10 entries. Ready? Let's go. Number 1, recurring formatting. In pretty much any job, you have these tasks where you need to routinely put things into the same format. Whether those are your product announcements, internal news, or in this example case, our content roundup, right? Once a week, we go through our best LinkedIn posts with AI and we have it extract sort of 5 highlights. And then we want to put this into a nice format so we can post it on LinkedIn and on Medium. Here's how they're supposed to look, right? With headings, the main paragraph, a little quote, and then the link to the full post. So instead of doing this every week for 5 to 10 minutes on our own, we once sat down to write a quick SOP on how this should be structured, right? We actually did this also with the help of AI by giving it a good example and asking it to extract instructions. And now all we need to do is go to our sample roundup, right? So this is the last one that we have. And then here ask the agent, hey, can you please format this according to our how to format weekly content roundups guidelines. And then in a second, right, it will take this, rework it, and we have something that is copy-paste ready for our new system. And here you see how it starts adding the new elements to the page. You can use all of Notion's blocks, right? So it's absolutely amazing here. And this works no matter what recurring format you have, right? If there's a certain element, for example, for your announcements and you have meeting notes and you want to just grab the essence and then turn it to cell format, works just the same, super helpful and a great little time saver. Number 2, how to get real-life knowledge into structured data. The next one is a fun one, if you don't have to do it manually. A client needed a database with all the countries of the world, together with their ISO 2 code, plus the corresponding flag for every entry. If you get this task on your desk on a Monday morning, you know those are going to be 2 to 4 really annoying hours of work. But with Notion AI, it's really just one prompt. Please create a database for me that has all the countries of the world, a second property with their ISO code, and for good measure, add their flag. And of course, this is a very niche example, but you need to think bigger, right? Basically, whenever you are now tasked with taking any real-world knowledge, like in this case, countries of the world, right, and turn it into structured data in Notion, you should use AI for it rather than doing this yourself. A different example for personal use case, travel itineraries, right? We're planning a trip to Tuscany. That is general available knowledge, right? Where you should go, what things you should do. So we asked Notion AI to please plan out the first version of the trip and turn this thing into a database, right? With all the structured data, even like thanks to a new map view, right? An overview of the places that we want to visit. And within, minutes, we have this full thing ready. Number 3, avoid double data entry. Use case number 3, again, can be a real lifesaver for mundane work. One of our clients has to schedule surveys for buildings, and that has to happen in Google Calendar because the other side needs to be able to access the calendar invite. But at the same time, they want to keep track in Notion on the individual buildings that they have when this appointment has been scheduled. Now, of course, in the age of APIs and integrations, we could build a custom sync, right, that connects Google Calendar to their Notion and does that automatically. But that would take quite a few hours of development work and would be fairly expensive in consulting fees. Thanks to Notion agents, this is actually something that we can do, 80-20 optimum within minutes. All we need to do is screenshot the calendar after the scheduling is done, drop it into Notion agents, and ask them to update the corresponding buildings, and poof, you have pretty much the same result without any of the upfront investment. By the way, there are two key puzzle pieces that you need to make AI really work in your Notion workspace: the AC/DC framework and a general master prompt. I just gave a talk about this at the Make with Notion showcase in Munich. So if you would love to see a more in-depth video about these, then let me know down below so I can add it to our list. Number 4, Streamline Reporting. This specific example here is updating OKRs, but this is true for pretty much any situation where you want people to regularly do something based on their responsibilities. Traditionally, what we do is we build cool dashboards like this, right, to help people navigate and find out, well, which are the OKRs that we have and which ones am I responsible for, which ones do I need to update. But I think over the next few months, we'll actually see a big shift here in how we use Notion. Because why do I need to click myself through the UI, right, to figure out what I have to do, if I could just pop up Notion AI and ask it, can you show me the OKRs that I am responsible for and help me update them. And then it goes out, it will figure out the structure, right, like what it is that we have there, and then it will tell me this is what you're responsible for. Right now, this also takes a few minutes because it sort of needs to analyze the OKRs, but if you follow one of my other advices of creating a general master prompt for your system, where you basically teach Notion AI this in advance, so it doesn't have to figure it out in the chat, then this also is a lot quicker and will immediately basically give you back what you're responsible for. So we see these are the objectives that I have, right? And now I can tell it, well, actually, reduce manual work. We are currently at 35, please update. And the user doesn't even have to click through. Now, of course, if you're a power user in Notion, which probably you are if you're watching this video, then this is a lot less relevant. In the time that you can tell AI to do this, you might also be able to click into it and do it yourself. But there are two very big considerations here. First, right now we are on this page, so it's easy for us to access. Oftentimes, though, we might remember this in a different context, right? So then we need to be able to do this much quicker. So in that case, right, being able to do this from anywhere in our workspace without having to navigate here is a huge benefit. And second, if you're not the power user and just someone, right, who occasionally has to open Notion to report on OKRs, then this is a big help. Because rather than having to relearn the UI and figuring out, well, where did Matthias leave the elements for me to go in there, right, and update the value to 30, right, which it already did. Oh no, this is the other one. But rather than having to do this individually, we can just ask AI to help us do it. So I think this will greatly help with adoption of more complex workflows in Notion across the team because it simplifies the user experience. What we've started doing with our clients here is basically package up these prompts for users, right? So rather than them having to figure this out, we write prompts that detail all the information, and then they just have this copy-paste thing that they can drop into Notion whenever they want to do the process. Number 5, rework large databases. This use case is really interesting for growing companies because, as you know, Notion is an amazing tool because it can easily sustain your processes from a small team of just 5 people all the way up to a company of 5,000. But along the way, you'll have to make some adjustments to the way that you manage your data. In general, you always want to start with the simplest possible system. As few databases as possible, as little complexity, because otherwise, right, you're creating this monster of a system that is not even yet required. But as you grow and your complexity of your business increases, that's of course when you then need to also adjust your underlying data architecture. This is work that we as Notion consultants do quite often for our clients. So this is an abstracted example, but we literally just did this for a client last week. There's a partner database, and currently the company is keeping track of all partners in one. But as you can see already in this example, we're actually having two different types of companies in here. We have the distributors and we have the suppliers. And in the beginning, that was fine, but as we grow out the system, we realized, okay, we need to add more and more properties to this that are only partially relevant, right? Commission rate is only relevant for distributors, minimum order only for suppliers, and so on and so on. So at some point, the individual workflow need would make this database very unruly. The solution? we want to create a new architecture where we actually have one parent-partner database and then two child tables, one for distributors, one for suppliers. That way, we still have a single entry for all our partners that we can use in the rest of the system to relate out to, but on the individual tables, right, for suppliers and distributors, we can keep all the specific information that is just relevant for one of them. Data migrations like this used to take us one or more workdays because there's a lot of properties to go through. You need to coordinate which goes where, and then there's just the manual process of doing it. Thanks to Notion AI, this is so much quicker. I'm just going to walk you again right through this simple example here. The prompt that we want to use is something along these lines, where we tell Notion AI, well, we need to have help, right? Then explain exactly why we need to do this, and then tell it to first analyze the entries to understand the structure, identify which properties should go on which child database, then set up this new database structure, and that's the most important part, go through every single entry in our partner database and have it migrated to the new system. So just pasted our prompt in here and I will have it work on it. Now, while it does so, I want to share with you 2 tips to make sure that if you have these large tasks, it actually goes through everything without pausing, right? Particularly when you ask it to update a lot of entries. It sometimes does 10 and then asks you, hey, I did 10, should I continue? Or it pretends that it's working in the background, but it actually isn't. This is actually a current issue with ChatGPT 5 because it's quite lazy. So in order to make sure that this doesn't happen and it keeps working, you want to do 2 things. First, switch from auto to Claude, right? This will already make it much better. And then the second key thing that I have found is very effective at having it do the things continuously is to tell it to first write itself a checklist, right? And then if you want to go the extra mile, ask it to even not just keep track of this inside its own chat, but ask it to create a page where it does this, increases the adherence again. And then sort of like these last 2 lines as well, right? To continue working autonomously until everything is completed. And whenever it thinks it's done, it should first come back to its checklist and check against it before it hands it off back to you. And this is very, very effective at significantly extending the time that the agent works autonomously. And you see, right, as I'm talking, what it does here on the side. We, for example, have this restructuring checklist where it now goes through and keeps track of its tasks while it's executing on them. Super helpful, right? Additional benefit, sometimes it might still bug out, right, halfway through, or if you have like hundreds and hundreds of entries. But thanks to this page, right, you can then ask it to please, basically you're doing a task, here are your instructions, here's where you're at, take it up there again. So sometimes you might have to restart the chat once or twice, but since you have track of everything, right, it makes it much, much easier. So we're just going to quickly zoom ahead while it continues building this out, and then we can take a look at the end result. Now, as this is working, you see the effectiveness of our prompt, because you can tell here where things, where you can always open this up and you see, oops, sorry, it keeps skipping down, but you see it asks, it knows that we only should come back to us when it's 100% complete. So it's checking its internal progress, right? How many, did it analyze the structure? Did it identify it? Yes, yes, yes. And then realize, actually, I still need to verify the data integrity. So it goes now through this, it realizes there's an error, but it doesn't hand it off back to me, right? It knows it still needs to continue working for it to be done. Now it's checking against its own progress. And then once it's done, it will check everything off and hand things back to me. And there we have it, right? It came back to us with all the tasks completed. We could check quickly right in here whether it did everything and what it thought along the way. It really helped sometimes to add these migration notes. And then mostly we can look at the result. So we have our Cafe Notion database here, right, with our entries. And we have the distributors linked to distributors, and with the supplier linked to suppliers. It also removed already the properties for us, or did it just hide them? Let's see. No, it actually removed already the properties for us that should no longer be on this database, and added them to the other ones. Now, if you do this in a live system, I recommend that you add to your prompt that it should not delete the properties from the main system until you had a chance to check, right? It also is quite helpful along the way. Keep in mind though, right, you can always recover deleted properties by going into 3 dots, edit properties, delete it, right? So you can restore all the values, even if AI was a bit over eager. But yeah, this is pretty amazing. But of course, This is a small database, only like 20 entries, but still, the same principles will hold true whether you're migrating 20 or 2000 entries. With 2000, you might have to restart the chat once or twice, but it's insane, right? This would have previously taken us far, far longer. And you can think one step further also. This was now a one-shot migration. Oftentimes, what you will have to do, right, in these situations is you need to first analyze things and then create the documentation or the decision documents for the rest of the team to decide what should go where. If you have dozens of properties on here, some of them might not even be needed. And again, here you can plug in AI to ask it to first, right, analyze the data and create in this decision document that you can circulate with the team before then going and actually making the changes. Absolutely insanely valuable tool, and we're going to use it all the time for our work. Number 6, extract tasks from meeting notes. Notion Agent really makes the Notion AI meeting notes so much better. One of my main complaints with it at the moment is that as it is, right, it simply creates you this highlight, and then you have your action items down like this, which is plain text, right, and not particularly helpful. But with Agent, right, you can now as well create yourself a simple standard prompt, and after every meeting, just ask it to, hey, can you please extract the tasks from this specific meeting that are relevant to me and add them to my task database. And if you use the general prompt, right, that we recommend using, where you explain to the system how everything's structured, where tasks should go, how they should be entered, etc., then you can get away with that, a very, very short prompt at the end of every meeting, which nearly mimics the functionality of a different tool like Circleback, right? We use Circleback still for our note-taking because it extracts these tasks automatically, but if Notion AI keeps improving at this rate, we'll probably want renewed and switched into Notion meeting notes once our year plan is up. And number 7, automate reporting. As I said in the intro, I'm excited about a lot of these use cases, but this is my absolute favorite, just because of the sheer potential. You know the problem, not everyone uses Notion, and particularly external stakeholders like your investors or some partners might require you to take Notion data and somehow make it available to them differently. PDF export in Notion is not great, so we need to find a different method. This is it. The real-life example is that we have a client that has hundreds of buildings, and every week customer success needs to go through every single building and create a stakeholder report that shows where are these buildings in their current progress. That's an insane amount of time every single week for data that already exists. So here's the demo, right, of how to handle this with Notion AI. We have our database, in this case for my Cafe Notion franchise, and we have like different timestamps on these things, right? Sort of, okay, when did we hire the staff? When was the first month completed? And so on and so on. We also have a status property. And of course, small database, right? So we could do this manually, but for the sake of this example, we're going to do this fully automated. What we've done is we created an SOP that lists out exactly how to go about this task, right? And what should happen. So that means we don't have to instruct Notion AI every time, right, with a long and thoughtful prompt. All the customer success person needs to do is, can you please create my weekly report in Stakeholder, right? Stakeholder reports using SOP creating stakeholder reports. Hit enter, and it will go about it. Now, I forgot to switch from Auto to Claude, which I pretty much use for everything in Notion AI these days. But since we have very thorough instructions, I think it should be able to do it just as well like this. You see, it has started reviewing first our instructions and then goes through all the other parts of the system. As always, we can inspect what its thinking are if we want to troubleshoot it, but we don't have to, right? We would now just go elsewhere in the system. You don't need to stay on the page for Notion Agent to work. You don't even need to stay in Notion. You could also start a new request on the side, right? These things can happen in parallel. So even though for the sake of this video, right, we wait now until the result is there, usually it will just work on autopilot. And here's the report that we can now share with our stakeholders. We have an executive summary at the top. We then have a status overview in a table format because stakeholders and investors love tables, where we see color-coded which entities are completed, which ones are in different statuses, and most importantly, what are our timestamps across the line for that. And again, this is a simplified example. You can take this a lot further. If you have qualitative updates, for example, right, where the team writes text-based updates into the system on a single building or so, you can just extend your prompt and ask Notion AI to also take that into account, not just the structured data when putting this together. So while right now the executive summary is based purely right on what we have as database data, it could be based on the individual updates, right, that people write, where you capture all these things that numbers alone can't do. Again, this is so powerful, and you can extend it to pretty much any kind of reporting. If you are a VC and you need to report to your limited partners, like how are your investments performing? Well, this is perfect for that. If you want to internally communicate the team, so from a previous example, right, like the OKRs, and want to give regular snapshots and updates in Slack on how this is going, this is perfect. So many use cases for it, right? Using the existing data that you have in Notion and making it accessible to others. Notion Agent really makes the Notion AI meeting notes so much better. One of my main complaints with it at the moment is that as it is, right, it simply creates you this highlight, and then you have your action items down like this, which is plain text, right, and not particularly helpful. But with Agent, right, you can now as well create yourself a simple standard prompt, and after every meeting, just ask it to, hey, can you please extract the tasks from this specific meeting that are relevant to me and add them to my task database. And if you use the general prompt, right, that we recommend using, where you explain to the system how everything's structured, where tasks should go, how they should be entered, etc., then you can get away with that, a very short prompt at the end of every meeting, which nearly mimics the functionality of a different tool like Circleback, right? We use Circleback still for our note-taking because it extracts these tasks automatically, but if Notion AI keeps improving at this rate, we'll probably want renewed and switched into Notion meeting notes once our year plan is up. So much for my favorite 7 AI agent use cases for Notion. Now I'd love to hear from you. What are you using Notion agents for? What other things should we try? Let me know down below in the comments. And if you are now all excited to start using these agents in your own workspace, then I have one more thing for you. When you deploy Notion agents in your company or team workspace, it's really important that you get permissions right first. Because the last thing you want is that AI makes any changes that were not supposed to happen, or that it accesses information it's not supposed to access. To make sure your system is ready for AI and also secure for the rest of your team, click here. This is a thorough guide for everything that you need to know about Notion permissions. Again, click here and I will see you in a few seconds.